Welcome to the Real Recovery Show. We meet every week at noon on Fridays. You can catch all of our episodes at themeetingspace.com. Just hit the Real Recovery Show. So today's episode is, what to do when your thinking is driving you crazy. There's a lot of times when something will bother me and I'll start, really focusing on, what is it? And I have tools that I've learned over the years on how to do that process, but intuitively, rather than rehashing and repeating the same thing, worrying, coming up with what if contingency thinking, plans and whatever, and filling in all the stories and stuff like that. But overthinking can make a person very stressed out, very uncomfortable in their own skin. They could tell themselves scary stories and believe them and react to them as if they're true. And studies have shown that if we really put a lot of meaning into a thought, that there's, to the degree that we believe in it, is to the degree that our neurotransmitter, our chemical response, our inner pharmacy will activate for that, and we can think ourselves into a depression. We can think ourselves into a scary experience, into a panic attack, into an anxiety attack. We could believe that we're going to get fired and then do things and sabotage our lives, or we could tell ourselves scary stories about a partner and then destroy the relationship. We could come from toxic shame and have really seemingly fixed ideas that we just accept as true. And when we're running on those ideas, it's our reality. And when other people may not respond to us the way we would think that they should, to mean that we're loved, then we take it very personally, and we think that, if they're judging us, that it's them hurting us, but it's really like we're hurting ourselves with our own beliefs, and if you're new to recovery or to the process of uncovering, discovering, discarding all this stuff, stay tuned, because if you've done alcohol, drugs, food, etc., to change the way you felt, feelings don't just come from nowhere. They're an effect too. They're an effect of our thinking. And so today I'm joined with somebody who's done a lot of work on himself and who has found a way out of that self-imprisonment and keeps using what he's been learning to grow and to keep healing and to keep unlearning this stuff. And is 16 years sober. But also has created a program, if you will, a non-12-step program that is meeting at the meeting space, and it's very much focused on unthinking that stuff, of being able to learn the difference between ideas and beliefs, being able to discern when something is coming from just something that I've always known or always told myself, or whether it's coming from an intuition and it resonates. And I feel like that's the key for me. I feel like if I still believed all the things that I believed in my childhood, or I believed in my addiction, my active addiction, if I believed when I was homeless, if I still believe all the stuff, which, by the way, all those beliefs just led me to believe more toxic things, and I would just build up that tree of having more toxic narratives. If I still believed that stuff, I don't know that I'd be alive today, because my head was a crazy place to be, and I was constantly reacting to the things that I was thinking, and God, I could, if I'm not careful, believe something that's not true, and then and feel something, anything but peace. And so, if you're new and you think that recovery is just about not drinking or not doing drugs and learning some tools on how to cope, stay tuned, because we can heal. We can experience true freedom. And on my guest today, he has an actual ebook that's coming out where he's poured a lot of this stuff into it in July. And he, I really feel also that when we when we write everything down that we've been learning, or we share at the level of like a podcast or something, it strengthens it in our own mind, and it gets even more clarified. And and so being willing to like create this and run this program over at the meeting space, and give people the it all written down in a free ebook is an excellent way to invite other people that need those tools, but also are maybe already using similar tools of mindfulness and need a place to discuss and practice, learning all this. And so my guest today is Randy Hayden. And again, he has 16 years sober from alcohol, drugs, all of it? Okay.
All of it.
Right. It's kind of funny because even within recovery groups and environments, there's a lot of people who, don't realize that the thinking really is the problem. Like, even though the main problem centers in our mind, right, as we're told, there's a lot of people just believing that there's just certain behaviors I got to stop doing, and I got to make sure I'm not coming from a selfish, self-seeking perspective and stuff like that. But this toxic thinking, these ideas that we have that make up the story of who we think we are, we could live our whole life and never know who we really are.
That's very true.
Yeah. So how did that start for you? I mean, when you were a child and you grew up, like, what was your environment as a kid? Like, what were you exposed to? When was it when you start to internalize and start to spend more time in your head thinking and figuring out and trying to plan and all that other stuff too?
It was all my life. I can never, ever recall a time that I wasn't in my head. As a young man or young boy, I was very imaginative, very creative, drew cartoons and such, and wrote stories.
I did that too.
And stuff. So it's the whole kind of like nature versus nurture. I think there was something wired into me that had this going on, but certainly at the time, you're a child, you don't realize your parents had problems. And of course, that's all you know is this little world you're living in and stuff. But,
were you shy?
No, not really.
You had friends?
Talking about drawing cartoons, I was in the first grade talent show, or in first grade, I was in the talent show. All the grades were doing it. So of course, it was a little scary to get in front of the whole school to do it, but I did that. And then when plays were going on, I always was in the play. So,
oh, interesting.
So yeah, so it wasn't so much that. In fact, actually, I think it was really overcompensating for my feeling of being less than others and just detached from others. I had no real friends.
Yeah.
At best, acquaintances and such. So I was reaching out, trying. Can you see me? Can you appreciate me? And again, this kind of stuff I didn't realize until after doing the work. It was just my world, my reality and stuff. I just never fit in.
It's so true. I feel like the thinking, the story we build about ourselves, who we think we are, and who we think we're supposed to be to fit in, who we think everybody else is, it's like the wallpaper of our world. It's the curtains, it's everything. Like, our thoughts about it is what we then filter everything through. Like, I had so much shame as a kid that when I was made fun of, I didn't think I should be on the planet. I had things I believed. My mom told me that she wished I was never born. And so I believed that I shouldn't be here. And that toxic thought alone, fueled a whole myriad of other toxic thoughts, which then said, well, if this is true, then this is true. And so when kids would make fun of me, I wasn't able to just shake it off and say, screw off. I took it all the way in, and it became more of my curtains, more of the walls of my world, and so how we are as a child. I mean, I know sometimes people go like, why the childhood? It's because that's where a lot of our narrative developed, a lot of the who we think we're supposed to be too, not just the who we think we are, but the false self, the one we're supposed to be showing the world so we fit in, not wanting to ever suffer, not wanting to feel left out. To know that you did the plays and stuff because you felt like you weren't seen, you didn't want to be invisible, right?
Right, exactly. So I tried really hard. One of the things, I really do believe my parents tried their best to love me. was not in a household with alcoholism. There was no physical abuse. So at the time, I never really equated any of this to being traumatic. Mm-hmm. But again, looking back on it, there was an emotional abuse involved with it. So, you know, you go through life, you do well. So my when I was alluding to earlier about my parents having problems, again, and there certainly is some me getting creative and connecting the dots here and such. But when we leave my father to rest, getting to talk with his brothers and sisters and such, what things were like and stuff, it was like, oh, that makes sense now, kind of stuff. So. Without turning this into a big long ordeal about my father's history or my mother's history, their marriage, and such, it was right about the time we moved into the house that we lived in from kindergarten on till the day they passed on. When I moved in, again, in kindergarten, moved there, and Dad just didn't want to throw the ball around with me and just didn't want to be involved with my life, basically. But my mother, yeah, she was very controlling, very manipulative, and she didn't limit it to us. She tried to mess with all the other kids and all the other family. It just was, yeah. And there was a resentment towards my mother right away because my mom was just this, like, witch. And the kids were making fun of her, making fun of myself and my sister and stuff. So, you know, again, we didn't really acclimate into the neighborhood and stuff. And this went on for a while. In fact, gosh, I was fighting regularly, so much so that in second grade, it was advised that I went to another school. So what I'm getting at is kind of like escapism was before there was drugs and alcohol. When things got difficult, we didn't necessarily try to work through these problems. We just split and avoided them. And that was another thing in that household. We never talked about problems.
Yeah.
So, you know, again, it was a conditioning.
Why you would feel invisible. I mean, your father didn't acknowledge you, and then your mom was so big. Like, that was such a big, it was so much focus on her. You know, I actually had the same thing. It sounds very interesting. Like, I felt like my dad, my mom was very big. Like, the world, like, everything revolved around my mom, and my dad was, leave me alone. You know, I'm going to just go focus on, you know, like, I just want peace. You know, like, just focus on his own thing. But in my house, we did have addiction.
Yeah. So, again, as we talked before we started recording and such, that, you know, my parents not being alcoholics did not mean that there wasn't dysfunctional alcoholic addictive behaviors. My dad, it was one of the few rules in the house. Do not bother your dad when he comes home from work. He's had a hard day at work. He comes, he eats his dinner with the TV tray and watches TV. And, he taught me escapism. That's how you deal with life. You don't engage with those in the same room type of thing. So,
what did he do for a living?
He was a machinist.
Okay.
So he was a man who worked with his hands and, you know, he had not much education and such. And certainly not any emotional intelligence, but he was back to kind of the oldest child being the hero. My dad was the oldest child among five. They went through the Depression together, you know, those types of stories of pulling together.
Also, back then, I mean, alcoholism aside, like, that was so socially accepted that the man just brought home the money and the woman ran the house. Like, that was just the way people did that too, you know. And if you throw in people who are not, you know, having any kind of relationship skills or, you know, being able to really show up with each other and have a real joyous familial experience, I mean, unfortunately, they could just, you know, excuse it by being that role that they think they're supposed to play, which is the false self. You know, like, this is all anybody should be expecting of me. This is my man's job, is to just go and do this. And her job is to worry and to be all trying to control all the things, you know, to make up for the feeling of what was missing for her.
Yeah. Well, life was out of control, so she was doing her best to bring things in control.
Which that's an illusion, too. It's always out of control.
Yes.
But
yes,
so then, okay, so you grew up, and when did you first start actually using alcohol or drugs?
6th grade.
Okay.
And I said out loud, this is great. I want to do this every chance I possibly can. So as I started.
And what did it do for you?
just made me feel comfortable in my own
Did
skin.
it calm the thinking?
To some degree. I just felt, my memory is I just felt great.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do it as many times as I could, and every chance I could. If I got $1 for lunch money, there was kind of a whole thing where
Is that crazy? We only got $1 for lunch money,
Yeah,
or like 15 cents for milk.
Yeah, but that's about what I think that's what lunch ran in the cafeteria.
Right.
But myself and I would find one other kid who went out onto the field and smoke and drink. And we would smoke cigarettes and such too in our circles. But yeah, like me and you, Lisa, we'd meet up at the beginning of the day.
Yeah.
It's like, you want to go house on a joint?
Yeah.
That's cool. So
Yeah.
again, here's $1. I got $1 and stuff. We'd go to the guy who had the joints in his cigarette pack.
Yeah.
And we'd either smoke it then or at lunch. And that's what we did.
Anywhere but here. Yeah. Okay, and then so when did it start becoming more of like I know you were doing it now or wanting to do it all the time, but when did you first start experiencing a problem with it?
Well, gosh, when you're surrounded with this lifestyle, literally, I had no one I ever talked to who didn't drink or smoke and stuff. That's just the way it was. Mm-hmm. I got a DUI around 21 kind of thing, but that was also, gosh, everybody
Normal.
had some...
Yeah.
and kind of the whole comparing myself. Well, I didn't go to jail for a barroom fight, so what's the big deal kind of stuff. So it didn't really seem to be a problem for a long, long time. But I was playing in bands as well, too, so this lifestyle, if anyone's ever played in bands, typically you get free drinks. Mm-hmm. And I used to think that if I didn't get good and drunk, I was leaving money on the table kind of stuff. But again, this is the social circle that, again, everybody allowed for it. And there'd be things like if I knew, I'm going to get hammered tonight, then it wasn't so much a designated driver. It just was, I'm not driving, so I don't get another DUI because I had a couple few. So just little things like that. Mm-hmm. That, again, at the time didn't seem problematic, but looking back at it, it's like, normal people don't get drunk 7 days a week.
Yeah, my favorite line, I say this all the time, is it's like asking a fish how the water is. If all the other fish are swimming in the same water, it's like, well, there's no problem here. Right. We're all doing the same thing. Yeah. But okay. So what had to happen for you to get help?
Well, so externally, things were going pretty well. I was married. I had the best job of my life.
Doing what?
I've worked in the motorcycle industry since 1985.
Oh, nice.
I love
retired. Motorcycles.
So, it got into it at 20 years old, working for a wholesale distributor, just answering the phones, taking orders, and opportunities presented themselves. But eventually, what brought me out to Las Vegas, I was a sales rep, going around all the motorcycle shops. Then actually, because things didn't work out there, started working with shops, was parts manager and stuff. But anyway, eventually got an opportunity to get back in at the level of the manufacturer. So I worked for a company called Scorpion Sports, Scorpion Helmets and Apparel.
Okay.
And it was a great opportunity. It was the second person they hired and stuff, real ground floor. And we were doing really, really well. So you would think, gosh, man, he's getting his shit together. Things are going really well. I was like 43 years old. And no, I wasn't just getting drunk 7 days a week. I was getting blackout drunk. So, yeah, it's just, I just didn't realize it because, again, everything slowly progressed that, I just hated myself and hated my life. And again, doing the inner work, realizing that, anybody lies to you, you don't like that. Eventually, they become kind of an enemy.
Right.
And such. Well, I lied to myself so many times. I betrayed myself. Again, I just had lost who I was, trying to fit in and be the person that I anticipated.
Yeah, if you hate
yourself,
yourself, you don't know yourself.
Absolutely.
But when I hated myself, I thought that I knew things other people didn't know. In fact, I kept people at an arm's distance because I didn't want them to see who I hated. You know, I was very much about trying to protect myself from letting anybody see anything, which is, again, another reason why we have to heal this stuff, because it's impossible to have any really true intimate relationships if we're having to guard up and be, you know, who we think we're supposed to be, the chameleon, so that we fit in with other people. I never felt like anybody really loved me. They didn't know me. But I didn't love myself. I didn't know me. But I believed the story I had about myself. I believed the things that were said to me that were cruel too. And if people said nice things, it bounced off of me. It wasn't anything that was going to stick to anything, because I had such a toxic self-image, you know, and so, and such a fear-based of fear, terrifying fear of abandonment, you know, which really fueled a lot of my thinking. You know, it's like, you know, who do I need to be? What do I need to do so that somebody doesn't leave me? I don't lose something that I think I need. I don't get fired from something. You know, somebody doesn't judge me. You know, like how much energy kept getting put into the wheels of that was just, I mean, I'm exhausted just thinking about how much I had to do, my overhead every day, because of the toxic thinking driving the bus. I was literally reacting to my own thoughts.
Yes.
As if they were true.
Yes.
You know, and there's no real peace in that. You can't, you're making yourself sick. How can you have peace? How can you have any love? How can you have relationships? There has to be another way.
Yes.
But at the time, you were believing all the stuff that was going on in your mind, and it just kept stirring up the same stuff, and you kept finding proof of it, and then you would drink. And then you would just, you know, survive your way through your life, and you hated yourself, yep. You know, and it had nothing to do with who you really were.
Correct.
It had all to do with the story you were believing.
Absolutely.
And that's what's so amazing about recovery.
Yes.
Yeah. The secret to healing is to recognize that I'm doing it to myself.
Yes. Well, owning my part in the story, mm-hmm. having unrealistic expectations, mm-hmm. That was a big epiphany for mm-hmm. myself, and concluding that no one else was responsible for the quality of my life. Because once I became abstinent, yeah. I don't, and I'm hesitant to use the word sober, because there isn't really any joy. It's just there wasn't the drugs and alcohol. I mean, there was bouts of depression where I was
yeah.
suicidal and
yeah.
such. But eventually I came to the point with a trusted friend that we went through a process of self-discovery, self-awareness. And it's common in recovery, you know, just not to name names and stuff.
Right, for sure.
But anybody who's involved with this process of healing is aware that you go through
in recovery
an exercise mm-hmm. where, again, you get clarity and confirmation on the causes and conditions that brought you to this point in life. And I could see, you know, the fear came up right away mm-hmm. And such. But yeah, the big takeaway of this was, it's like, I blame everybody yeah. for my problems. I don't take responsibility for anything. Mm-hmm. And if I want to turn my life around, mm-hmm. I have to, again, basically make this affirmation. No one else is responsible for the quality of my life but myself. Now, that doesn't mean I was going to perpetuate the whole, like, if it's meant to be, it's up to me kind of stuff. I had gone from being super independent to being a little interdependent. Again, it was mm-hmm. a process. Mm-hmm. And stuff. But there, you know, a circle of trusted friends and mm-hmm. such that I could rely on and get what I needed.
I think that sometimes where people can end up in a little temporary holding pattern in recovery is where they do enough work where they take that inventory and they find out their own part in all their resentments, all their fears, all the whatever, but they don't actually look at then behind that curtain why they were, like, what is really going on? Like, what was the thinking behind that, and being willing to question it. And so it becomes a thing like, okay, it's not your fault, it's my fault. And they stay, though, with an element of, I need to just always do better. I need to always just do better. And if I don't, then I'm not lovable. I'm not good. And so there's, like, still an element of guilt that can get exorcised through amends and better behavior to a point. But if the thinking doesn't change, if we don't find out what's driving the bus, what makes me people please if that's my character defect? Like, what am I afraid of? Or, what makes me lie if that's my character defect? What is it that I'm believing, that's so hard? And so I find that sometimes the idea of self-forgiveness, it's not saying, oh, that's okay, I did the thing, whatever. It's saying, okay, let me understand what was driving this. Why was I feeling like this was the thing I needed to do to be okay? Because if I don't really find out the thought that's behind it, I'm going to be watching this character defect for a while replay in my life, because on some level, I think of it still as a tool, and I don't see what's driving it. I don't see what's causing it. And so for me, the thing that I love about this conversation too is that, that whole idea of going from being unlovable and bad to having just running on false information, just running on ideas that I believed. And if I believe these things, I'm going to suffer. And if I suffer, I'm going to act out. I'm going to react. I'm going to feel threatened. I'm not going to feel secure. And so this idea, like, it's just information, being able to detach from it just enough to go and not in the moment, because like when the fecal matter hits the oscillating device and you're like needing to fix something like before it creates any more damage, there's this self-inquiry, there's this, okay, what was my part in it? But if we just stop at our part, the behavior itself, I feel like we're doing ourselves an injustice, because we're not actually going, but why?
Right.
Why was that the part I felt like I needed to play? Why was that? What tool did I not have, and what story was I running on? And because if I run on that story and I don't have a better tool, I am going to do this again, lamenting why God's not taking this defect away, and feeling bad again and again and again. And it's not about feeling bad about ourselves. That's the whole point of this conversation. It's about freeing ourselves from that toxic thinking.
Yes. Absolutely. And for myself, when I started this process of self-discovery that has enabled me and empowered me to stay sober for 16 years, was one common question was, what's really going on?
Yeah.
Or where's God in all this?
Yeah.
What's motivating you? Whatever exactly the words are, I was trying to, why did I have to lie? Yeah. Why did I have to exaggerate?
Yeah, why did that just happen?
Yeah. I'm talking to this person. I exaggerated things. I was acting like I was a big shot.
Right.
And and then the negative emotions I've learned over the years, they're not necessarily a bad thing. They're kind of like the dials on your dashboard.
Yes.
If you see your car's overheating and you keep driving, you're going to have problems with the motor. You're out of gas.
Danger,
Eventually stop.
Danger, Will Rogers, danger.
So there's a phrase that some people that are listening may have heard, feelings are not facts. Mm-hmm. And again, basically, I interpreted it at first was like, if I'm feeling this way doesn't mean it's real, kind of stuff. It's a conditioned response. But I learned over the course of time, again, talking with people that have had much more experience with this, that no, it's not a fact, but it is an indicator.
Yes.
It was somewhere I'm out of alignment. So I am very confident. I actually convicted with the fact that every human being's innate state of being is at peace and calm. And although it doesn't seem like it's commonly demonstrated, but really true, everybody has those moments of time. But to prove my point is, again, talking about childhood, before the world messed with us, and stuff, before we became the terrible twos and had me, mine, and all that kind of stuff. If you look at a child, if they get their basic needs met, they're fed, their diapers are changed, and they're being held and loved, every child is pretty darn happy. And that's, this is now a total educated guess, but if you put a nice little baby in somebody's arms, I don't care who you are, all of a sudden they turn into being a calm,
if that person's energy and all that, because we're always like interacting like that too. But if somebody has like a really like energy, a child could pick up on that too.
Well, that's true. Yeah. Again, there's children who start crying
really,
when they're home.
The idea that we really. Well, the mind who's not believing scary stories and ideas that don't resonate. Because for me, the gauge for me is to take a thought that something's coming up to heal, and I know something's coming up to heal because I feel something other than peace, which speaks to what you're talking about. That's how I know. If I have a charge, if I have a meaning given to it, if I'm attached to something, if I am afraid of something, like whatever it is, there's a story I'm running, there's a dialogue I'm running, and so the feeling that I will feel. And by the way, this is not just negative thoughts, right? If I tell myself, it's going to be so amazing. Oh my God, this is the missing piece. This is the guy, this is the job, this is this. Oh my God, I'm going to lose weight. This is going to be amazing. And I go, this is going to be my life, right? Then I will experience this elation for something that hasn't even happened. I've told myself this exciting story, and then should it not happen the exact way that I'm projecting out, I will be disappointed, I will be resentful, I will feel low self-esteem, I will feel depression, I will feel anxiety, I will be embarrassed, shame, everything. And I literally just did that to myself. And that's just that. So we could talk ourselves into being romantically loving to a person, oh my God, you're it, because you're this, and we're gonna this, and blah, 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 and build ourselves into a whole thing, and nothing's happened. Nothing's happened. We're not present. We're not detached, wearing life like a loose garment. We're literally just up in our story of who we think we are and how we think it's going to be and what we think we need and all of that. And that's one of the things about recovery is it helps us to first recognize this is me running my own life. This is me and my story of myself, and I could relinquish that and then get quiet and just hold on to only what resonates. And for me, I totally agree. If it's peace, there's no defense needed. There's no argument needed. I don't need to be a big shot. And I don't need to hide anything. If it's peace and it resonates, it's an inner knowing. It's not a story or a belief. It is just an inner knowing. And I want more and more and more for all my thoughts to be in alignment with that, because that is my natural state, like you were saying. And in that natural state, there's no need to self-medicate. In fact, all the self-medication I did was to try to catch that high, to that feeling. I wanted whatever the effects were of my thinking to stop. And so I didn't have any clue on how to shut that off, but go and chemically or behaviorally try to induce that kind of change. But to see that I don't want to believe my story as if it's true with an exclamation point. I want to put a cute little question mark on the end of everything I believe, willing to say, you know what, believe this the whole time, other people believed it, family told me, generations, this is what we do, blah, blah, blah. Maybe it's not true. Maybe it's not true. Maybe it doesn't serve me. Am I willing to be honest at the effects it's having on my state of mind, my feelings, my relationships, my job, my health? Because of what it does to my body to have that kind of toxic thinking, sickness, right? Am I willing to be wrong?
That's it. So, again, as mentioned, if we started something, it's not a typical recovery with X number of steps involved with it. But to begin with it, I'm just trying to distinguish with it, tentatively calling it the results. But as you're going through, and again, as we've been sharing these principles and these paradigms and such, the first step is and actually in this writing, I talk about confirmation bias. So again, if I think the world is this way, I am going to seek out proof. I will prove to you that I am X, Y, and Z. I am, again, whether I'm the greatest guy in the world or I'm the lowest loser and stuff, I will prove to myself this. So that's what I'm getting is setting this up as the first result is admit you don't like being wrong, and because of that you've had problems. Yep. So it's not necessarily wrong in an argumentative or debating way.
I love
but
that.
Again, it's just I just do not, again, I am set in concrete. This is who I am, and this is the way the world works. And I will not only pass a lie detector, I will get into an debate with you why I am this way when. And I think this is to some degree when people talk about the insanity of using and such. When you're active in your addiction, you forget the consequences. Right. I'll deal with that later. Yeah. I need to get high today, right now. I need to. It's not wanting to. Other people might want to. I need to. But when you have that absence I was referring to in the beginning of this time until I had the epiphanies that I did, again, I knew you could not tell me and stuff, this is the way the world is, this is who I am. I'm smarter than you. I am an intelligent person. And I think most people are intelligent and such, but it doesn't serve them that intelligence because, as I mentioned with my father, having no emotional, I had no comprehension how my emotions were driving my thoughts and my actions.
Emotional intelligence is intelligence and tapped into a sense of intuition. Like, I don't feel like you can be emotionally intelligent if you're not in some level of mindfulness and authenticity. You can have a lot of emotion, and you will if you have a lot of thinking, or you could just have frozen feelings like being really quiet, like your father. At this point, we're going to take a quick break, though. The opinions expressed here are strictly those of the people who gave them and do not represent any 12-step program or should replace your own intuition or professional medical advice. See you in a bit. The Meeting Space is a facility with over 100 weekly recovery meetings for addiction from alcohol, drugs, sex, food, gambling, codependency, and PTSD. When someone is scared to go to their first meeting, we walk them through the process, ask them and answer questions to assuage their concerns. Many are court-ordered to attend, and we provide free court papers and teach them the process. Our glass-enclosed, soundproof children's playroom enables parents to be in a meeting while watching their children. We have healing workshops, craft fairs, and special authors who come to teach and sit with our fellowships. During COVID, we were declared an essential business by the County Commissioner's Office. We were kept open so that we can continue our daily work with traumatized chronic relapsers and those who would have used alcohol or drugs in isolation. Local businesses rent our space as well to financially help with this mission, and they get to have a great location for their business meeting or training. The recovery store in the center of our facility provides literature, clothing, medallions, and custom gifts to encourage, aid in, and celebrate a person's recovery from alcohol, drugs, PTSD, or unhealthy behaviors. Both the recovery store and the meeting space are open every day, including holidays. Saving lives, educating the community, reducing social stigma, providing a safe place for people to heal. Our nonprofit is supported entirely by donations by people like you who want everyone to have a place to go to heal. Welcome back to The Real Recovery Show. You can watch us on Facebook, YouTube, and on Amazon Fire TV. You can listen to us on the PHLV radio app. You can get our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. And we have our new channel, The Real Recovery Show, which is on YouTube. And if you go to themetingspace.com and you click on The Real Recovery Show, you can see all of our episodes posted there. And before the break, we were talking about a new program that Randy started, and it's called Easier Ways. Easier Ways, and it's at the Meeting Space. Mm-hmm. And it's what day?
It's every Saturday, 3:30 to 4:30.
Okay.
Yeah. And it is in room 104.
All right. Perfect. Okay, well, and so it's really interesting because a lot of times people would come into the recovery store and they want something a little bit more general. You know, there's a lot of 12-step programs that are very focused on specific addictions or on emotion specifically, etc. And so to have something that really just focuses generally on the thinking, this is something that would be good for anybody, right? It's not just for addiction.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Based upon traditions that go back thousands of years, mm-hmm. Buddhism is the one that comes to mind and such, talking about the monkey mind, mm-hmm. The busy mind and such. I think it's part of the human condition, but certainly those that I've known over the years of my sobriety and such, people that are very dedicated in this process and have helped a lot of people and such. Well, another way to say this is such, you don't need to be an addict to understand addicts have obsessions about using, okay? Mm-hmm. Well, an obsession is a dominant thought.
Right.
Okay, so those that are in recovery, this is a commonality, but I started realizing that, mm-hmm. when I worked in the motorcycle industry, I was in a management role, talking with people, talking with customers and such, and realizing that they have very active minds and they couldn't stay focused. Most people are not present. They're worrying about the past or regretting the past, worrying about the future and such. Finding people that can be really present in the room is an uncommonality. So yes, absolutely. And by the way, if you're wondering what the secret of this is, it's mindfulness. It's being present. It is being able, when thoughts come into your head, and they do. So one of the misconceptions I had is that I could have a totally quiet mind. No, I just don't have a mind that hangs on and stores all this stuff that comes in. It comes in, and usually it goes out pretty darn quick, because things like focusing on my breath, looking you in the eye, listening very closely, even repeating words back there, but also being intentional about showing up this conversation with no opinion, no prejudice,
getting out of my own way, detaching, not having any expectation, any controlling ideas. And your mom could have really benefited from this, for sure.
Well, so the thing is also, though, you have to understand that this is something that needs attention to. So again, we're in Las Vegas. There are a lot of people that will drink, but very, very few have recognized it's something that should be, reduced or eliminated in their life. Until it's a problem, it's not a problem. And that's the same thing with this thinking, that you have an active mind and busy, and it's like, I like it that way. I get stuff done, but you're never at peace. People that are highly stressed, if you're a person who feels stress or burnout, that is an overactive mind.
That's why I feel like, for me, the answer has been to be intuitive, to not run on a story, to just what resonates, only if it resonates, because it sorts it out for me. And if I get caught up in a story, I'm much more likely to make mistakes, to choose methods of doing something that are not the most efficient, to waste a lot of my own energy and time, to choose paths that there was a better way of doing it, to do things that I could have delegated. I mean, the amount of accomplishment that that it seems like I'm capable of right now is only because of not living in that headspace, and I mean, I knew that this was my challenge. I'm a Gemini too, and so even there it said, your sign is very likely to think your way out of stuff, and so I would have big ideas and then spend the rest of the thinking talking myself out of it, about how I don't have this resource, or or I can't really this, or whatever like that. And so your intention with this is to help people be less afraid of their human experience.
Yes. Which is, again, is another, as I mentioned, in my process, my exercise of self-awareness, an inventory of my assets and my liabilities. And such. Fear was driving all my behaviors, and again, as I went farther and farther down into what was causing this, what is causing that, some kind of like the stack of turtles thing, and such. But realizing that my core wound is the abandonment wound. And I'm not worthy. I'm not enough. All my worth came from accomplishments and acquisitions. So coming to the point of, well, I can look at you and go, no, you don't have to jump through hoops for me to respect you and appreciate you and such. But why couldn't I do it towards me? Well, again, that was the conditioning of growing up and such. I had to perform. I had to be a good boy. Otherwise, I was subject to some type of abuse. Very rarely physical, but more emotional, psychological abuse in my household and such.
Like what? Like shaming? Or
Yeah, I've been called repeatedly and stuff. You might be book smart, but you got no common sense. Actually, there was a word in front of that my dad would throw, and he would say it very loud. And it's just basically because
he was jealous of you.
So my dad looked up to his Uncle Bill, who became a doctor.
Okay.
Talked about him all the time. I'm pretty darn sure Uncle Bill was my dad's hero. And because I tested really well is second, and part of the whole going to this other school in second grade, I qualified for an accelerated learning program, ELP, extended learning program, and so I was a brain. And so I think he had expectations that I could go off and be a doctor like he always wanted to be. Because looking back, right around about seventh grade, when I started using regularly and stuff, I was just like, Dad, I just don't want the responsibility of being a doctor. Which I don't. I never really having somebody's well-being, depending on my skills.
My issue too.
And that was when it was very much detached that he never ever wanted to associate with. I think I had.
You broke his dream.
Yeah, kind of thing is like,
himself.
like if I had that guy's brains, I would have gone to school and I would have been a doctor. He's throwing his whole life away. Because I was getting in trouble in school and all this. And it was looking pretty sure that I was not going
It's
to.
so interesting, though that
yeah.
a lot of the stories that we believed about ourselves, even when we're trying to beat to our own drum and find our own way, we are affected by the stories that our parents had, what they saw when they looked at us, and even though they were really, we know now, after being in recovery, talking more about themselves than about us, their expectations, their stories of what's good, their stories of what's bad, their self-shame, the stuff that they projected onto us, which is just normal. Like, in all families, parents are going to see themselves in their kids, good and bad, the things they like about themselves, etc. But there's been so much of those ideas that I've had to question that never even originated from something I came to my own conclusion as a child. They were just, well, I'm going to believe my mother because she must know she's my mother. There's this authority, which is, it's kind of a mixed bag because it and I feel intuitively like you had this too, is that you learn to question authority. You learn to question it because you want to find out for yourself what's good for you and not take on more beliefs from other people. And so even the idea of a belief, I love the word lie is in the middle of the word belief, to belie, to take a word and to break it down. An idea is an idea.
Right.
But if I identify with it, if I believe it is fact, if I never question it again, this is now part of my program, and I won't necessarily open that file again for a long time and see if whether or not it should be, right?
Exactly.
What, does this idea serve me? Why do I believe it? It could have been in a painful moment. It could have been one of those moments when I was trying to prove something not right about myself or the world. And so I said, you see, this is true too, because this proves this. And then I never questioned it again. One of the sayings in recovery is contempt prior to investigation. There's not anything that could sabotage my healing more than a closed mind. And the closed mind is because I'm nothing to see here. Nothing to look at, and I have to actually see the effects of my thinking, whether it's the wreckage that I don't want or the way that I'm feeling, to be willing to make that connection to go, okay, maybe there's a little bit something wrong with my thinking. I'm willing to see what resonates. I'm willing to maybe be open to what could be, right? Because I will defend a belief. I will defend it if I'm identified with it, if I feel like it makes me protected, if I have told myself this idea, I keep this idea nobody's ever going to hurt me again because this is what I'm going to do from now on. And then I won't question that because it's part of what I think keeps me safe, but it's part of what keeps me sick. Yes. And I don't necessarily know because I'm in running and survival mode. And so when you have your group and you go through this process, how do you point to the difference between an idea and a belief?
Well, you're absolutely right. Ideas, there are probably 10,000 ideas that we have over the course of the day. But when we believe it's true, Lisa, then I can create then the reason why it's true, a narrative, a story for it. So that's it. Now, if I may share a little metaphor or parable, a little story and stuff to explain it. So a belief is if I put a parachute on and get up into an airplane and jump out, that I'll live. Okay. Now, faith is actually putting the parachute on, getting in the plane, and jumping out and such. And of course, it's going to be scary the first time. You jump out of the plane enough times, eventually it becomes something you can trust. Okay. You don't necessarily have the fear involved. Well, that's the process here with new ideas and new beliefs, and eventually getting to the place where trust. So what I'm getting at here is helping people being less afraid of their human experience. Okay, well, again, you are afraid, and I'm not here to tell you you're wrong. Again, I want to be patient. I want to be kind. I want to create a situation where you feel safe, at least enough to, again, acknowledge that there's something that's been bugging you. Because, again, we built this armor. I've got my breastplate on. I got a force field on. I am going to make sure no one's ever going to hurt me, and no one's ever going to see me. That's, again, with pushing people away. If you really knew me, you'd hate me too. Okay? So, again, that's speaking for myself. But other people, I know they're guarded. I've had enough conversations and stuff. That's just standard operating procedure. So, again, there takes time for people to get comfortable enough to share openly and honestly, and then it's basically, asking more questions than telling anything,
like, does it serve you? Like, when I'm talking to somebody and I'm like, and then they say something that doesn't resonate, because I want to know, like, so I listen intuitively when people share, does this resonate? And when I hear something that I feel is just a program in their mind, and they're like, have like an energy, it doesn't resonate. And so in that moment, I'll be like, is that true? Like, what's, maybe, and to invite the other person to look at that. It's usually some story about what they don't deserve, or what they can have, or what it's going to be, or something that's the only thing that's stopping them. I was a stripper for a decade, and I loved the job. But when I left the job, I knew it was time. Like, I was not supposed to be doing it anymore, and I was in recovery, and I just knew. I knew I wasn't what I was supposed to be doing anymore. It just resonated. I felt a sense of inner knowing and peace, except when I was in financial fear. And so when I went into financial fear, which is really just telling myself a scary story, my concept of God is not going to provide. I can't do anything else. I'm going to have to be stuck, clipping coupons for the rest of my life, because the only thing that I can do is strip. Right? And I was like wanting to go back to dancing just to shut that up, because I was like, you're right. I'm listening to it. Like, it's preaching in my own voice, telling me stuff I already believe, and wearing down my resolve to trust God and to move on to another experience. And I would get this intuition that says, don't. And so I didn't. I did once, but then I didn't. Because there's nothing worse than trying to strip with a head full of God telling you don't. But I did it, and then I was like, okay, I can't do this. And it was like, honestly, the hard part of that experience was meting out and facing all of that toxic thinking. And if I didn't do that, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today. I would still believing that. I would still be believing the lie that that's all I could do. And there's nothing wrong with dancing. It's just that it wasn't right for me anymore.
Yes.
And so it was only fear that was saying do it now. And I can't feed fear. I can't listen to that. I can't go and prove that. And so other things started to appear because my mind was open to being wrong. And I started to learn that, I just got the chills. I started to learn that there's other things that I could do. And I got intuitively led to learn how to do all these other things. And I've done so many things now since that time period, because, that was like 20 years ago, that blow me away. And all that I've been doing is being willing to come to a limiting idea, stop, and ask, is it true? Where did I get this idea? Why am I so vehemently believing this idea? What could be the truth instead of this?
Yes.
Because I will say this, and I'm no different. If I have a belief, and it's fueled by some fear of abandonment or some story about self, and that whether or not I'm deserving of anything or whatever, I am going to defend that idea if you tell me I'm wrong.
Absolutely.
I will lie, I will exaggerate, I will defend to the ends of the earth to tell you why this is true. I will use all the things in my life to tell you why it's true. And I will strengthen that idea. And I will dig my feet in. And I will do myself no service. But if I'm willing to be wrong, and I just say, you know, maybe there's another way of looking at this. The mind, and this is what's so powerful, already knows what the real truth is. And so that opening, that question that I've now allowed to open an opening, it's not this fixed idea anymore. It's not the truth, my truth. It is just something I've been believing. The mind then becomes open. What could be the truth instead of this? And what really resonates comes up. And that's
Absolutely.
why mindfulness and being willing to be wrong and not buy everything that we're telling ourselves creates this amazing journey of going deeper and becoming free, to free the mind.
Yes, absolutely. So what you're touching on there is, again, why the mindfulness and the meditation is, and again, letting ideas pass. And again, it's not such an echo chamber. There's not so much noise in the head. Because when that calms down, there's an innate wisdom that every one of us has that kind of percolates up in a sense to the conscious mind. It's always there with us. Every now and then intuition comes there. We just don't always trust. At least I'll speak to myself. I don't always trust it. I dilute it and pollute it. But when I can allow my mind to calm down, there's simple things like starting this program and such. All in all, I'm 59 years old and stuff. I've had a much better life than I ever imagined. I've been very fortunate to be present when people are suffering. I know my pain and my recovery is not just for myself alone.
Isn't it so powerful that you can
again,
be
I
present
just want to do this,
and you cannot believe the story that other people are running, and you can hold that space for them while they're like talking about the things that are making them feel sick, and you cannot believe the stories that they have, and you can know that they're telling themselves these stories, and you can know that there's another way.
So again, it's just this human condition that everybody's got these narratives, these stories. Again, it's just the way it is. And how it again eventually came back and boomerang towards me was knowing that's again just human condition, and I could look at you and go, "You're not your story." Okay?
Yeah.
And I saw it, I don't know how many times.
Yeah.
20, 30, 50 times, that eventually it's like, that's you.
Yeah.
That's you. You're not your story, Randy. Because again, I can be empathetic. I can be kind and patient to another soul much quicker than I can be towards myself.
Yeah.
I'm much harder on myself. And again, I believe this is a very common humanistic trait.
Yeah.
So I'm not looking at you. I'm looking at, again, basically your mind. And not the inner essence. When the inner work, that is deeper than intellect. So when we're talking and going through the process and discovering things, there is something, this intuition, this knowing. I don't necessarily need to have all the facts lined up to come to this conclusion. I just know it.
Yeah.
And again, as you're saying this, and I think the listeners here and stuff, there's certain things that, I just know it.
Yeah.
And when we have enough times when we've acknowledged it, we can start to trust it. And it doesn't matter whether somebody's like going, "What are you talking about?" And it's like, "No, I know it."
Yeah.
Type of thing. So again, to get to the point of trusting yourself, the world gets to be a little less scary.
Yeah.
So everything that's going outside of me that I can't control, and again, a lot of my thoughts I can't necessarily control, what I can control is where I focus my attention. And if I'm focusing my attention into this moment right here and right now, something that I don't have the vocabulary for, I can't describe. I've experienced it countless times. I can tell you have as well too. I hope many people that are listening to this have had some moments of this, that you just get to this space that it doesn't matter what's going on in the world. It's unconditional. I can find this space.
Yeah, because
and
it matters
that's
what we think about it.
Again, was at first with drugs and alcohol, I didn't have to be afraid of relapsing, and now it's just kind of been like a row of dominoes. Now I don't have to financial fear. No, again, I can always, track record is. That's the nice thing about being 59 years old. I have survived enough things that I thought was going to take me out. That's like, yeah, I'll get through this one too. No, I would have never volunteered for this, but I'll be okay. There's a lesson somewhere within this. And again, when I can be calm, have some composure, not freaking out and such, it's amazing that there's a resolution to this. I'm not fighting. I'm not trying to control. And hence, that's the easier ways. If I'm not trying to make things happen, so for my peace of mind, it has to be this way. And if it's not, you're going to hear about it kind of stuff. If I can just allow and accept and yield to reality, then life is easier. So that's it in a nutshell.
That's beautiful. And so your website's called easierways.org?
O-R-G.
easierways.org. And again, our the meetings at the meeting space. You can go to our website to find when it is, because we may have more of them. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for joining us on the Real Recovery Show. We'd like to give a special thanks to our sponsor and gracious host, PHLB Radio here in Las Vegas. And you can go to I'm sorry, when you said you were going to cut to me, are you including his website?
Yeah. I'm just gonna cut to the actual sign off. The thank you. Okay, I'll do it. I'll do it there.
Where?
Thank you for joining us.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll say his website, and then I'll say the thank you.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Alrighty. Alright, stand by. In 3, 2.
So thank you so much for joining us, and your website is easierways.
easierways.org.
And then you can come to the meeting space, and you can go to the meeting, or you can check us out on themeetingspace.com to see when they're going to meet. Thank you also for joining us today on the Real Recovery Show. We'd like to give a special thanks to our sponsor and gracious host, PHLB Radio here in Las Vegas. See you next week.